and then we are going to all access it. Okay, so in HostMonster, I scroll down through all these different options here, and I eventually end up with something called database tools. Hey, that's probably a pretty good place to make a database, right? Now, the database that we're going to make is called a MySQL database. Does anybody remember what those letters might stand for? The SQL in particular. These are bonus points that you can cash in for peanuts, a cap, or a swig of my water bottle. SQL. You got 2 out of 3. The S is incorrect.
Yeah.
No? Super. S stands for structured. So SQL equals structured query language. SQL. Okay? Now, what's a query? That's funny, actually.
That's a big word for a question.
Yeah, it's a question, right? A query is a question, right? So a structured query language is basically a way to ask a question, right? And what is a database when you think about it? What's a good analogy for a database? It's like a table, okay? It's like a table full of books, right? Or a table full of pots. Or one of the things I like to think of is like a bucket or a barrel full of things, right? A database is a container that holds information, right? Now somebody said a table, so let's consider this room as a database, okay? And then we want to fill this room up with information, with things, right? But they're all kind of different, all the things that we want to put in there. There's names, there's people's first names and their last names, there's email addresses, there are cities they live in, countries they live in. So what we do in this room, which is our database, we build tables. And on each table, we put one type of information. So this is a table that has the email addresses, has the country that you're from, that has your first and last name, right? So in a database, which I like to think of as a container of some sort, right? So here's your database. Then inside that are tables, and those tables hold information, right? Each table has a unique set of information. It's almost like going to the swap meet, right? And you have the person that has the sock puppets and the person that's selling the fireworks, and each table has a different assortment of information, right? Now, within each table, that information can be broken down further. Like, let's say it's the fireworks table, so you could have cherry bombs, right? And you could have Twizzlers, I don't know what they're called. What are those things called on the stick? Sparklers. Twizzlers, isn't that like a candy or something? I think you'd be in trouble if those things lit up on fire. Okay, so you got cherry bombs, you got sparklers, you got your M80s, right? These are all things we used to blow up things when we were little kids. So all the information inside the table, even though it may be similar in that it's all fireworks, you might break it out into individual pieces of information, right? The types of things, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to make a database, and we're going to make our database have 2 tables, all right? And these tables are each going to gather specific pieces of information, just like fireworks and pots or something like that, right? Now, these 2 tables that we're going to have, one of them is going to get what you might call, contact information. So it's going to get things like name, email address, phone number, things like that. And the other one is just going to get something else, like the country that you live in. Okay? So these are just two tables. It's like setting up two tables at the swap meet, and over here I want to sell t-shirts, and over here I want to sell toy cars, right? Just two pieces of information. What's unique about this particular database and about these two tables is that we're going to join them together. Okay, we're going to connect them somehow. And these two tables are going to relate to each other. Right? These are going to be related to each other. They're going to be connected somehow. And because they're connected, the database will now be called a relational database. Because there is a relation between these two tables. If somebody goes in and they put that their name is Mike, and their email is Mike@Yahoo, and their phone number is 520 blah, 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 and they're from the USA, even though that information is in two tables, it will be connected because they'll automatically be assigned a number that will stay with their record in each table, and that will be connected to form a relational database. Now, most databases that are out there that are in use are relational because the reason is because they can make as many tables as they want, and each one can hold different information. Like, for example, when you go to pima.edu and you click on My Pima, and you put in your username and password, it accesses a ginormous relational database, and it takes that email and password and it checks it against the database. It looks at your username and it says, is there a user with this name, right? Like, my username is the first initial of my first name, first initial of my middle name, and then my last name, right? So I put in my username, and then I put in my password, which looks like this, if you want to copy it and get in my account. So I put in my username, and I put in my password, and it goes in and checks to see if there's a user named that. And if I mistyped it, then it'll come back and it'll say there's no user. I looked in the users table, and there's no user called GK Lumo. I go, oh, it's GJ Lumo. So I type it in, and then I type my password. It says, oh, okay, there's a user called GJ Lumo. Let's look at the table that's related, connected to that one, that has the passwords in it. And let's see what the password is that's connected to that username. Now, if I typed it in correctly, it lets me in. If I mistyped it, then it says, password was incorrect, please try again. Now, once I get through that process, which of course with pima.edu is sometimes a challenge. Once I finally get in, days, weeks, possibly years later, get into my account, then it brings up all my information. There's all these tabs, and it says like academics, and it says, in my case, there's one for teaching because I'm a teacher here, and then there's a little tab to go to my web mail and stuff like that, right? So you guys have these things. So all of that stuff is stored in further tables in the database that are all related to each other and coded to your username. So it brings up all your information. And that's the case with all of the websites that you go to. Amazon.com, you go to pay your AT&T or your Verizon phone bill online, you go to pay Comcast, or you go to call Comcast and say, look, I really can't pay this month, but can you give me another 30 days? All of these things that you go to, they're all relational databases, right? And of course, who has the greatest relational database in the world? The NSA, right? They have all the information on everybody and everything. So if you want to work, if you want to do databases, go work for them. Okay, so we understand the process now, right? We understand a little bit about how databases work, and now we're going to create one. So the easiest way to create a database is to use the database tools and to click on this one right here called MySQL, oops, or not. Don't click on that one, whatever you do. I'll go back. So what we want to do is click on one called MySQL Database Wizard. I clicked on one that was just MySQL Database, and I want to use the wizard because it just kind of walks me through the process. And as scary as databases may seem, they're really far less intimidating than you might think. Okay, so step one, create a database. Now, In the case of HostMonster, when I signed up for HostMonster, guess what they did? They put me into their database, right? And when I said, okay, I'm signing up for a account at HostMonster, they said, okay, what's your domain name? I said dreamco.org. And so they assigned me a username. It's Dreamco, and then the first letter of my dot. So like on my dreamco.com account, it's dreamcoc, and here my username is dreamco for dreamco.org, right? So whenever I make a database, they always put a prefix in front of everything that has to do with my database. So the prefix is my username. So in that case, it's dreamco_. And then whatever information I put in about the database. So that means every database that I have will have this prefix. So if they ever if I ever call them for support, they can go, oh, it's a Dreamco database. Well, let's just search for this, and then we'll find it, right? Okay, so the first thing you have to do is name your database. You can name your database anything you want. I'm going to name my database DB for database, and then I'm going to call it 456A. And then I'm going to go next step. Okay, and right here it says, hey, we created a database for you. Database DB456A. Okay, it says now you've created a database, so now you have to create a username and a password for somebody to access that database, and that person would be you, the administrator, right? So I'm going to go ahead and call my user user3, right? And then for the password, I'm just going to put in, I'll use this password generator and create some crazy password. And normally you would write this down, but I'm not going to because I'm just that way. Okay, so here we are. We create our username and our password, and we create the user. Okay? So boom, we created a database. In one step, we created a username and a password to access the database. Now the next thing they want to ask you is, okay, you created a database called Dreamco for, let's call that Dreamco, okay? Dreamco DB456A, that was a database you created. You created a user, user3, and of course a password. Now, for this particular user, what permissions and privileges do you want to give them when they access this database? Now, if you're creating it, what do you think the answer is? All, right? So you click on all privileges. Now, what does this mean if you can set privileges? What does this mean if you wanted to have other people access the database? You would set up a new user, and you have the option to give them fewer privileges, right? In a database, what are some of the main privileges that are key to a database? In other words, what can you do with data that's stored in a database? There's three things you can do with it. Edit. Four things. There's four things. What? Yeah, that can view it. That's true. That's a good one, but that's not one of the main ones. That's not like an action per se on the data. Max, what do you think? What are some of the things that you could do with a database? Data in a database. I'll give you as a clue. They might possibly be on the screen.
Creating an index.
You can read, write, edit, and delete information. Okay? So all of those are privileges, are permissions, right? If somebody can read your information, that could be really important. If it's an e-commerce website and they can read like all your usernames and passwords and credit cards, that's a big deal. If they can write to your database, they could drop malicious code in there and use your website to spread spam all over the internet. That's a pretty big deal. If they can delete from your database, they could go in and delete all your customers if you're their competition, and then you're screwed, right? And if they can edit your database, then they can go in and change information, and you're kind of screwed there too. So all of these things are really very important. So you want to give people just the permissions they need if you want them to access your database, right? Well, we are the admins, so we're going to give ourselves all privileges, and then we're going to hit next step. Okay, now, that was it. Okay, it was really just a couple of steps. I mean, it's like going for a drink of water. We said, I want to create a database. It said, what do you want to call it? How do you want to get in? What privileges do you want? And you're done. Okay? So that was really easy. And like I said, any of this process that you guys want me to sit down one-on-one and go through with you, I'll be happy to do. Now, the next thing we need to do, we've created the database. In other words, we created the container. It's like we just created the swap meet, right? Now we got to create the tables that are going to be at the swap meet, and we got to create little containers that are going to hold what's going to be on those tables. So now I'm going to go back to my control panel, and this time, instead of creating a database, I'm going to access the database, right? So I'll come down to the database section, right? And this time, I'm going to go to something called phpMyAdmin. And phpMyAdmin has got a fancy-dancy name, but all it is a way to access your database. So I'll click on it. It's going to ask me for a password because databases are kind of a big deal. And so I'm going to copy this password. Okay, it says, what's your username? We already know that I'm DreamCoo. And then I'm going to put in my password. And see, they're protecting your database here because the information is so doggone important. Now, all you guys have WordPress websites on this server, right? So if I go here to DreamCoo and I click this plus symbol to see all my databases, look at that. Everything that starts with WOR is a WordPress database. See that? So there's 28 of them on here. So there's some that I created and then all you guys, right? Now, the one we just created is this one called DreamCoo underscore DBA456A. Now there's one called DreamCoo DB456 already. The reason that exists is because that's the real one we're going to use in the class in a few minutes when we access it. This one that I'm making now is just a fake one that I made to show you how the process works, right? So we can mess this one up if we need to. Now, so here's the database. If we go to it and we click the plus symbol, it expands the database. I said it expands the database. Okay. And, well, the reason that it couldn't expand the database is because there's nothing in the database, right? We just started this swap meet, but nobody showed up yet, okay? So here it is, DreamCoo DB456, and it says, hey, you got nothing in there, You want to create a table? All right, let's create a table. Okay. So we're going to create a table, and these are all predetermined information that I've come up with, right? So let's see, the first table, I don't think it is called education. Let me see what it's actually called. I'm going to go look at the one that I created earlier. Oh, okay, so here's the real one, the one that we're mimicking right now, we're duplicating. You can see in here that there's two tables for this database here. There's one called origin and there's one called stats. And so the one called origin is essentially the one which is country, which is where do you come from, right? And I just picked some random data. And the other one is called stats, and that's just your personal contact information. Okay, so now I know what I need to make for this. I need to first make a table called origin. Okay, so I'm going to click once again on this bad boy right here. It's going to load that up, and I'm going to say, it's going to say, okay, you want to make a table, a container inside your database. What do you want to call it? I'm going to call it origin. And then it has this weird question here. It says the number of columns, right? Well, this is your table right here. And the number of columns is the number of pieces of information that you want to put in there. Okay? Now, for this first one, I am going to put in 3 columns, which means I'm going to gather 3 pieces of information. So it says, okay, you're going to create a table. It's going to be called origin, and it's going to have 3 pieces of information in it. You ready? Let's go. Okay, and sure enough, it creates the table, and then it says, okay, here's your 3 columns. Each one of these horizontal lines is a column. What do you want to call these columns, and what do you want to put in them? So the first one, I'm going to call ID underscore edu. And ID just means identification, and edu just means education, right? Now, when you create a column, which is going to hold data, you get to decide what kind of data it's going to hold, right? And these are all the abbreviations for the types of data you can hold in here. INT stands for what? Integer, which means a number, okay? Varchar is short for various characters, and that means it can be numbers or letters, right? And then there's text, date, and a bunch of other crazy ones that we won't even get into, right? I'm just going to use these 2 types right here. When I want to get a number, when I want somebody to put in a number, like a phone number, I'm going to say, hey, this field is going to hold an integer, which is a phone number. If I want somebody to put in a name, or even a name and a number, I'm going to put varchar as the type, and then they'll put that information in there. So what I'm doing here is in my little origin table is I'm getting 3 pieces of information. I'm going to ask for the country that they're from. Okay? I'm going to assign an ID to that, like ID underscore edu. And then I'm going to put a 3rd column in here, which is just called ID. And I'll explain why I'm going to do that in a second. Okay, so this first one, ID edu, is just a way to identify this person. It's going to be an integer, and it's just going to be a count. It's just going to be like, if Ray was the first person who signed up, it would assign him number 1, right? And then Max would be 2, Bianca would be 3, right? So I'm thinking, well, how many people am I going to get to sign up on my database? Well, I sure won't get more than 999, right? So I'll say, okay, for these people, it's going to be an integer, which means it's going to be a number, and the total amount of numbers that can go in that field are 3. Now, if this was going to be a database of people who signed up for Amazon.com, that number could be a billion, it could be ginormous, right? But one of the rules of databases is you want to just make enough room for the kind of information you want to collect, because if you say, hey, this database can hold 30,000 characters inside of a number, then the database will reserve space for that, and it will eat up a lot of room. So we're going to say, okay, we're only going to have up to 3 numbers in this identification column here, right? Then we're going to go over here, we're going to go down a little further, and we're going to say that this column right here is going to be something called an index, right? And what an index is an index is the most important column in the database. It's what you might call a primary key. And what it is we're saying that this field right here, this column that has the identification number in it, is going to be the most important column in this, because it's how we're going to identify the users. We're going to give them all numbers, right? Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to click this little box here, which says A underscore I. Okay? Does anybody have any wild guesses what A underscore I might mean? Artificial intelligence? Amstead, Illinois? It means auto increment. What does auto increment mean? 1, 2, 3, 4. Automatically increment the number 1 more with each user. Okay? So do you see what we've done here? The first table, the first column that we created in this table, we made it something called an ID, which stands for identification. We've said it's going to be a number that can be up to 999. We've said it's the most important number in this table, and we've said that every time a new piece of data is added to this, we want you to auto increment and make it the next higher number. So that means when Max comes and signs up and fills out the information in this table, it's going to give him 1, and then when Bianca comes, it's going to give her 2, and then Colt is going to get 3. And that's how it keeps track of people, right? So there's a certain amount of artificial intelligence built into this database. Now, your database itself can use a variety of different ways to store the data. And I realize some of this information is sort of esoteric. It may not directly benefit you. It's just interesting to know. These are all the different kinds of storage engines we can use. For this particular database, we're going to use something called InnoDB. It's just a type of database. Okay? Now, I am actually done with creating that column. That was it. That was everything that needed to be done for that. Now there's two more columns that I need to create. The next one is also going to be identification number. It's going to be called ID. It's also going to be an integer, and it's also going to store 3 numbers in it. And I'll explain that to you in 1 second. And the last one is going to be country, which is where we're going to pick up the information, where they come from. Which choice is country going to be? Varchar, because a country can have alphabetic letters in it. For the length of this, I'm going to put in 30 characters, and these are the number of characters. So somebody had a long country like outer West Somalia, North, they could have 30 characters, right? And that's it. That's it. Those 3 columns make up my entire database, and then I'm going to click this word save at the bottom. And now I have a table. It's called origin, right? If I want to look at the structure of that table, I can click on this tab here, structure, and it shows me right here. There are 3 columns. There's one called ID_edu. The type of information it can collect is integers, it's numbers up to 3. It's auto increment, which means it goes up 1 every time. Secondly, we have an ID column here, which is the same, 3 integers. And thirdly, we have a country column here, which is varchar, which means alphanumeric. It can hold up to 30 characters, and it uses Latin-based English for that information, right? Okay, now, that's one table. Now let's make another one. Okay, so we're here at the Dreamco DB456. We've made a table. Okay, let's say we want to make a new one. So I'll click down here on new. And it's automatically going to give me a table, and it gave me 4 columns here to work with. Now this one is also going to have 3 columns in it. Oh, I'm sorry, I take it back. This one's going to have 4 columns in it. And those 4 columns will be ID, which is an identification. It will be an integer with a value of 3. In other words, you can put up to 3 numbers in it. And that will be an auto index. In other words, it will increment, and it will also be an index or a primary key. In other words, that's the most important key in that table right there, the most important column. The second one will be called name. So it's the person's name. What type of data will I ask for? Varchar, right? So that's alphabetic, 30 for characters. The next one will be phone. Okay, and I don't know why. This one should be integer, but for some reason I have it down here as varchar. Should be integer, but maybe if somebody, I guess if, like in the UK, they can have letters, can't they?
If you put it as integer and then they try to put a dash in it, then it'll throw it out as an error.
Right, okay, thank you. So varchar, that's why that one is that way. I mean, that's what I meant. And then the last and final one, email, which is going to be what? Varchar, because it can have letters and numbers in it, and 30. Once again, InnoDB, all right, is the type. And then there we are, there's our database, and we can hit save. Or we can hit save. Please fill out this field. Oh, name of table, thank you. God, who is running this thing? Okay, so this one's called stats. Okay, there it is. So now we have two tables. And if we browse the structure of the stats table, look at the structure of it, we see that there's an ID field up there, which is auto-incrementing. There's a name, phone, and email, which are all varchar, right? Now, here's the important thing that we have to figure out about these. Okay, so our origin database has three fields in it: country, ID, EDU, and ID, right? This is what we call the primary key, which is the auto-incrementing number that keeps track of the person, right? And of course, country just gets data, right? But we also made this weird field here called ID, right? You notice anything interesting about that ID field? It's in both tables. Could it be that that's a way that these two tables talk to each other? Okay? So when you make a relational database, you have to put one field that is common in all the database tables. And that's how you connect the information together. So in other words, over here we can get Mike's name, his email address, and his phone number. Over here we can get his country, right? In this table right here, the ID field or column is used to auto-increment and differentiate him from all the other people who sign up. In this field, the ID EDU is used to auto-increment and keep track of everybody who's in this. But the ID is connected between the two. So whatever number this is, it's also over here, and it takes that and it combines the table information so that when you log into the system like pima.edu, it gathers all your information together. Okay? So this is how a relational database works. It's like having a little go-between, a little gopher between the two tables, who's going to take this information over here, connect it to this, and spit it all out. And you can take this information and multiply it times 100 for tables for the amount of information that Pima has on you. They have your phone number, your name, your email address, your A number, your classes that you signed up for in the last 3 years, your classes you're going to sign up for in the fall, how much money you paid, when you paid it, if you're on a payment plan, if there's men in black suits looking for you because you haven't paid anything, right? So all of that information is in their database. It's all tied together by an ID. Okay, so what we're going to do right now is we're done with the database creation part of this, which is this step right here. So you guys are now going to get a break, and then we'll come back, and then we'll all get to work with this database. Okay, what I need you to do right now is go to that tab on the website that you went to earlier tonight, where you went to the latest post for Advanced Dreamweaver, and scroll down past the videos at the top to Thursday, April 24th, to this section where it says Steps to Create a Sign-Up Form on your website. So we are at this third thing that we're going to do tonight, which is we're going to download a file from the website and use it to create a sign-up form. So what I want you to do is scroll down this little page here until you get to the third choice where it says download this code into the content box for this page and replace your student number, right? Click on that green word code, and then it will download a file called form.rtf. Go ahead and open it.
Still trying to find it.
Okay. Now it should look something like this. You guys all get it? All right, what I want you to do is hold down your control key and click the letter A to select everything that's on that page. Then hold down your control key and click the letter C to copy it. Okay, so we've copied everything that was on that page and we have put it in our paste buffer. Now I would like you to go back to your web browser here and click on a link that takes you to your website. Okay? And I want you to log in to the admin section of your website, so the dashboard. And then I want you to go over to the left-hand side where you can make pages, and I want you to roll over the pages option and click Add New. And then for this new page, you're going to call it Sign Up Form. Then right underneath the box where you put Sign Up Form, go to the right-hand side and make sure that you have the text tab clicked on. There's two tabs next to each other, visual and text. Make sure that the text tab is clicked on. That's where we can put HTML code in. Click in the big giant content box and do Control V to paste in that content that we had before. Now, while we're getting caught up on that, I just want to show you what this code looks like. So one of the nice things about Dreamweaver is it color codes everything. So if we look at this code that I just had you paste in Dreamweaver, we see that the orange stuff up there at the top, the tag at the top is called form action. So we immediately know this is some type of a form. The first tag is begin form, and if I scroll down here to the bottom, the last tag is / form or end form. So any form that you use on the web, whether it's a contact form or a sign up form, is going to have these form tags around it. Now, in addition to that, we can see that this form is collecting information. It's collecting a name, it's collecting a phone number, it's collecting an email and a country. That sounds oddly familiar. Hey, that sounds a lot like the information we're going to try and populate the database with, right? Now, in addition to the fact that it has all of these little fields which are gathering information, we can see that there's a table that was created within this form. Here's the begin table tag, and here is the end table tag at the end. And also there's all these little green tags on my screen here that say TR and TD. TR stands for table row and TD for table data. So when you make a table, and of course a table looks just like a table that you would make in Microsoft Word. Here's a table. And so to begin to make a table, you begin with a table tag. To end a table, you end with / table. Okay? To make a row on a table, you make a tag called TR, which stands for what? Table row. If you want to make a table data cell inside a table, you make a tag called TD. That means make a cell. And when you end that cell, you go / TD. And so you can have as many cells as you want, and when you end that row, / TR to end the row. If you look at this right here, you can see that that's what's happening on this screen. We create a table. We give it a width and a border of 0. We create a table row, which is this thing right here. We create a table data cell, which has a width of 65, and we put the word name in it. Then we end that table data cell. We create a new table data cell, and this is a form field which collects the name. We end that, and then we end the row. So we're right here, and then we begin a new row. Look at this code here. You can also look at the code on your screen, and then look at how it appears on the page. Right? Table, table row, table data, begin table data, name, end table data, begin table data form field, end table data form field, end table row, begin new table row. Right? Look at it right here with the one we can see, which is country, right? Begin table row, begin table data, put in the word country, end table data, begin new table data, and allow a form field to get the country that they're from, and the table data, and the row. Then we've got one more row underneath that where there's nothing in the first box, ampersand NBSP semicolon means a blank space, and then there's a submit button in the second box. Then we end the data cell, end the row, and end the table. Now this whole table is squished inside of a form tag, which means that when you fill this out and hit submit, that form will act like a form and it will do something. It will send that information somewhere. Now, this table was made here in Dreamweaver. Tables are pretty easy to make, and forms are pretty easy to make. If I wanted to make a brand new table in Dreamweaver, I would say new. I would just make a regular HTML page. Now, if I'm just making a table that I'm going to paste in a WordPress, I don't need any of this HTML document information. I just want to make a table. Then I would go up here to Insert. I would say Table. It would give me a handy-dandy pop-up screen, which would say, how many rows do you want in your table? How wide do you want it to be? What year do you want me to give you the pop-up screen? All that kind of stuff. Okay, here it is. So let's see. For this one right here, that table we just made, we had name, email, phone, country, and submit button, right? So that is 5 rows. We had 2 columns. One held like the name and the other held the field. And then for the width, we could put in, I think we had a 500 pixel width and a border thickness of 0, which means you won't see the border. So if I hit OK like that, and then I hit refresh, you can see that Dreamweaver very quickly, I think I made my table 5,000 pixels. Let's see what I did. It's really huge. Oh, 500%. Nice. Let's try 500 pixels. Okay, so after a few clicks of a button, I made a table. Now, tables are kind of cool in Dreamweaver. You can take them and you can grab like the center column here and you can just drag it over. And so now I'm all set to do things like say, okay, this is where you're going to put your name. This is where you're going to put your phone. This is where you're going to put your email. This is where you're going to put your country. And then we got to put in the submit button and all that good stuff, right? Okay, so far we just made a table. It was pretty easy. Dreamweaver was pretty helpful. Now the next thing we did was we turned this into a form. Now to make something into a form, you simply have to put in what are called form tags, right? So what I do is I go up to the top of the table and I click here and I just put in the word form. And you can see it automatically turns orange because that's Dreamweaver's way of saying that, you know, we're making a form. Now, I'm just hand typing in the word form, but Dreamweaver has a way to make forms that's just as sweet as the way we just made this table. It has a little way for you to insert a form, right? So let me go down to the bottom of this page here and insert a form just so we can see how cool it is. So let's see. I can go insert form and I'll just click on form. And it's going to say, okay, you want to make a form, right? What do you want to call it? What do you want it to do? Blah, 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 blah. And we'll hit OK. And you can see that it puts in those form fields for me. Here's the first form field, and then there's a closing form field. Now, if inside of this form, I want to make little text fields where people can type, all I have to do is click inside the form there, give myself some space, and say that now I want to insert a text field. And I can say that the name of this text field is going to be name, and hit OK. And it will put in this little orange code that says, okay, now we're going to collect a name. All right? So I could do that on my little table that I made up here. I could go here. I could go up here where I put, let's take another look. Let's look at this as split screen view. So we just wrote in the word name there, but here's where we want the field for them to input their name. So if I highlight this non-breaking space, which is an empty space, and I say insert form, and I say insert a text field and give it the name of name and hit OK, then it inserts a form field there. And that form field will be coded to the word name, which means that's the type of information that it's carrying. So if I just went in right here to each one of these and inserted form fields for phone, email, and country, then I would have all the form fields I need to go ahead and collect the information from people. Now the last thing that needs to happen, or the last two things that need to happen for this form to work, are we need to put in a submit button, and I can simply click into this bottom area here and say insert form button, and I can say that the name of the button will be submit, and it will drop in a submit button for me. And the very last thing that I have to do is I have to tell this form what I want it to do with the information after it has collected it, right? So in other words, this is just kind of a dumb form that you fill out, and then you hit the submit button, and it needs to know what you want to do with that information. So up here in the form tag, I double click on this word action, and then I tell this form where to go, right? Where do I want you to go? Well, the place I want you to go is you're going to go to a new page, and that page is going to have code on it that will allow you to submit that data to the database. So the page that it's going to go to is called insert.php, which is a page that has PHP code on it. It's going to allow us to stuff that stuff in the database. Okay, so let's go back to WordPress here. And everybody's made a page called sign up form. They've all dropped their code in there, right? Now, if you look at this code here, you'll see that there is a section up here, a form tag, that does have an action, and it does have a URL in it that ends with insert.php. But there's one thing that's different about this URL for me than from you. What's that? The student number, okay? So what you need to do is you need to go to this code here, and this top line where it says dreamcode.org/student0, you need to change the student 0 to your student number. So if it's student 14, take out the 0, put a 14. If it's 4, put a 4. If it's 3, put a 3. Now when you're all done with that, hit your publish button. After the page refreshes, click the view button that appears at the top, and let's go out and look at your sign-up form. Now your sign-up form should look just like that table. It should contain the table's worth of information that we made, but it will not work yet because there's no page for it to go to called insert.php yet. Now, my headline is red because I made it red, so don't worry if yours isn't. But your email form should look essentially like this. Okay? Now, this is exactly what we made, the table with all the information, the form fields that will gather that information, and the submit button. We also put in the form action that we want it to go to an insert page, but it won't work yet because we do not have the insert page. So now, let's go back to the tab we have open, which goes to the class website. And let's go down to line 4, number 4, and click on the green code link there. And download 2 pages in a zipped file and open them or extract them, whatever your happy PCs tell you you need to do. Okay, so let's see. Did you hit extract all files yet? Okay, and hit extract. Oh, I think you did already. Okay, hit cancel. Nope, close that. double click on files. Okay, great. Okay, so what you should have, you should download your files, you should extract the files, and then inside of a folder called files, you should see two files, one called insert and one called select. I need you to click on the top one of those, then hold down your shift key and click on the bottom one so they're both selected. Then I need you to copy those, which you can do by right-clicking and hitting copy. All right, the next thing I need you to do is go to your folder on this computer in the user area and find the folder that you have set up where we're connecting to WordPress. So on my computer, it's going to be a little different from yours. Let me switch over to this computer here. And what you would do is you would copy those two files. You would go to computer and user files. Then you would go to your DAR 257 folder, or whatever you called it. And then you should have some folders in there that are connected to WordPress. So you should have one called WP-content. Open that up. Then open up the themes folder. Then open up the 2012 folder and paste those into the 2012 folder.
Okay, can you go through that sequence of 4 again, please, for me?
Yeah, I'll just do it.
It's for me to get to him.
Okay.
Fine. So,
All right. Well, hold on a second. I gotta see what he did with these. He seemed to have opened them. Okay. So tell him that I'm going to save them in the proper place and he can watch me do it. So I'm going to go File, Save As. Okay, tell them they're saved in their proper place. Okay. Okay. So now, if we go over to Dreamweaver, you need to start up Dreamweaver if you haven't already, and look at our folder here, our 2012 folder. We now have two files in there. One is called insert and one is called select, right? Let's double click on the insert.php file and take a look at what we can see there. Okay, now, I know you guys are tired. It's the end of the week, but we only have about I'm going to say less than 15 minutes before you guys are done. So this will be the home stretch, right? Now, what you see in front of you is a whole big blob of gobbledygook code, right? I'm going to try and explain it to you in the simplest and most general terms available so you understand what's going on. And by the way, this is code I got off the internet and just put my information into, which means you can do that too. In fact, you can even use this code. You're welcome to use it, right? Now, we know, or we should know, we should be able to intuit, that we are putting together a jigsaw puzzle, okay? We made a database over here, right? Then we made a sign-up form over here on our website. And then we have something called an insert page, insert.php. Now, what we are attempting to do is have someone fill out the sign-up form. When they're done and they hit the submit button, it's going to send them to the insert.php page, and all this happy code here is going to insert their information into the database. Okay? So let's just talk about how it does it, right? Right up here, anything in orange is basically a comment, which is explaining to you what is happening. So up here at the top it says insert to user details table, right? And then there's a dollar sign and then SQL, structured query language. So this must be some code that uses the query language associated with our MySQL database. And it says insert in capital letters, which means it's a command, into the origin table. Okay? And then it says insert these two pieces of information. The ID number, okay, that little one that we're using as the go-between, and the country. Okay? Now, notice that it doesn't insert the ID EDU column because that's what's called an auto number, and all that's doing is keeping track of who this person is. It doesn't have to be spit out that you're number 568 on the form. It just has to keep track of it, right? Okay, then we have a new section here which has what you might call a fail-safe. And what the fail-safe is it says, if you're attempting to do this insertion into the database and it screws up for some reason, there's an error, then die. Die, right? I want you to die. Okay, what it means is kill the procedure, right? So if it's going out there and the server's down, or there's some malicious software it encounters, or maybe it's having a bad hair day, it's just going to cut off and stop working, right? That's what this code is, right? However, so this is what's called a conditional statement. If it doesn't connect and there's an error, kill the procedure and say to the user error, okay? And then point out what the error is, because MySQL has a whole listing of errors. Could not connect to the database. Database connection too slow. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm off at the Circle K getting a drink. Can I get back to you in a second, right? So that's a conditional statement. If something isn't working, then kill the connection, right? And tell us why. However, if it does work, in other words, if the condition is that it did not fail, it succeeded, then give us this statement. One record added to the database. Thank you. Click this link to go to the home page. Okay? Now, just like before, what do you see here that needs to change? Your student number. Okay? So in other words, this is going to take you to your home page. So go into this code here and change student 0 to your student number. It's in red. Now, by the way, we're at the bottom of the page here, right? And I'm sorry that we started at the bottom. I just didn't notice that it wasn't listed all the way at the top, right? So let me now. So we understand this is kind of like coming in the back door, right? We now understand the bottom part of this, how this works. Let's scroll up to the top of this page and let's see what's happening at the top. It's essentially the same thing. It's just that at the top, it's doing a few extra things that it has to do with the beginning of the process, right? The first thing it has to do at the top of the page is it has to connect to the database, right? So it has a money sign con, which means connection. That's going to equal a MySQL connection. Now in here it's got a string of information which connects to this database. First it has the location of the database, which is listed as localhost. That means it's on this computer, right? Secondly, it has the username that I assigned to it when I made this database. And remember, what I did tonight was just a test database. I had created this database a day or two ago, and at that point my Dreamco user was user2. And then finally the password, because once you make the connection, it needs to know where you're going, who you are, and what your password is. So the first thing it does is connect up to the database, right? Once again, here's that conditional statement. If it could not connect, then kill the connection, say could not connect, give me the error so I can figure out what's going on. However, if the condition is that it did connect, then I want you to go in and select the database that I created, which was called DB456. That's the one I created the other day, right? Now, after it connects to the MySQL and finds your database and brings it up, now we have it doing exactly the same thing it did down here. When we were at the bottom of the page, it inserted some information into the origin table. Well, at the top of the page, it inserts information into the stats table. And what it inserts is the ID, the name, the phone, and the email. Those 4 pieces of information that we need, right? And it has extra code here which tells you what it's going to call those pieces of information. Now, the last thing that we have to do here, that we have to explain starting on line 21 here, is that this is the way, remember there's 2 tables here. There's the stats table, which it inserted that information in at the top, and then there's the origin table, which it inserted that information in at the bottom. But how does it know that this information and this information are joined? The way it does it is, are these 2 lines, line 23 and 22 and 23. What it does is it says, after you insert the information in the first table, which is the stats table, grab the ID number that is associated with that information, and then use that ID number to insert that information in the second table with the same ID number. That's how the relational database works. That's how the relation is kept intact. It inserts it into one table, then it takes that same ID and inserts it into the next table with the same ID so that all that information is joined. Now remember, when you're inserting into a database is kind of like a two-way street. You can put information in it and you can pull information out of it. So the opposite is true too. If we had a page that was going to pull information out of the database, it would do exactly the same thing, except instead of insert, it would select the information from the database. It would select it from the first table, and then it would use the ID to select it from the second table, and then it would output it on a page for us. Okay? So, if you'll notice, there's a second page in here, which is called select. Now go ahead over into your files and double click on the page called select. And let's notice that everything about this page is similar to the last page, the insert page, except it's the opposite. Okay? So the first thing we do is we connect up at the top to the database using this PHP command, which is MySQL Connect. We put in the information there, where it's located, localhost, who the user is, and what the password is. We have the same if statement there. If you can't connect, kill the connection. If you can, then grab the database, but this time, instead of inserting information, we're selecting information. We're grabbing information. So we say select from the stats and origin tables where the stats ID equals the origin ID, where both numbers are the same, which means we're going to get all the data for one person. Then it says print it on a web page for us. So it says echo, which means repeat, in other words, like an echo coming back, which means print. So what it does is it puts in a table command. It puts in the table row command here that we're used to seeing. TH stands for table header, and that means that it's going to be in bold, right? It lists the name, the phone number, the email, and the country. Then it goes into the database again, and it grabs the specific information from the database and puts them in table data cells. The name, the phone number, the email, and the country. Then it ends the table, and then it closes the connection. So in other words, we went ahead and we hard-coded our little table over, the table we made over there, to accept information from people in the sign-up form, and the database is creating the table on the fly, dynamically, through code. It's grabbing the information from the database that you asked it to grab. It's connecting the tables together via a common ID, and then it's outputting it in a format that's pleasing to the eye. Okay, So what I want you to do is make sure that on your insert page you changed the URL at the bottom there on line 35, that you change that to your student number. And then I want you to go up to the File menu at the top left and do Save All. File, Save All. Then I want you to go over here to the right side of your screen, go to this Files menu, and click on this button right here, which connects you to your remote server. The next thing I'd like you to do is click on the select.php file, and then hold down your control key and click on the insert.php file, and then go up to the top of that menu and hit the up arrow. Yes? Okay, can we, all right. Okay. Were most of you successful at doing that? Okay. So now let's go back to our web browsers and go to the sign up form. And now go ahead and fill out this sign up form. Put in a name, put in a phone number, an email address, and a country. And by the way, when you're putting these in, remember we said we're all going to share the same table, so all this information is going to be common to all of us. So just put in, some bogus information in here, and then hit Submit Query. Now when you do that, it should take you to your insert page. And your insert page should have a piece of text up at the top that says, one record added successfully, click here to go to your home page. And if you did that, you did it right. Okay? If you had a problem, then I will come help you with that in just a moment. Okay, now that means that you have properly inserted your information into the database. Now, if we want to see that information, in other words, if we want to select it and bring it up, now we have to go to our select form, right? Now the select form I've intentionally kept hidden because I want you to know that we wouldn't want people to necessarily see that. Now if you go back to the site for this class and you go down to choice number 6 here, right? I want you to highlight that URL at the very bottom that has the red letters in it. I want you to copy that and paste it into your web browser, and then change the student number to your student number. And then hit return. Now when you've done that, you will now be using the select form, which will pull the data out of the database, and it should show your information in there along with everybody else in the class. Okay? Tell him that is correct. Well, did he replace that with his student number? Okay. Click there. Yeah, put your student number. Okay. Yeah, that's right. That's correct. Okay. Anybody have issues with that? No? Okay, good. Okay, so you guys all got it done. It's all working, right? So what did we do? Just a quick review of what we did. I created a database using the MySQL database wizard. And then inside of that database, I created 2 tables, one called origin and one called stats, with 3 columns in the origin and 4 in the stats. It's a relational database, which means these 2 were connected together with an ID. Then we downloaded the file from the website that had a form on it, which contained a table, which had cells in it that asked for information to be input, like name, phone number. We took that and we dropped it into the sign-up form that we created on the WordPress site. Then we downloaded the insert and the select PHP pages, which had pre-formatted code that was used to both insert the data from the sign-up form into the database via this model right here. And then the second thing we did was insert the select form, which grabs information from the database and outputs it to an HTML web page for us to see. And that's the last thing we just did. Okay, so the way you have to integrate this into your website is you have to take that sign-up form and you could put additional text on it. If we go back to the sign-up form here and we hit like edit page, where you have your form here, all this information that's in there, you can click on the visual tab or the text tab is probably a little easier, and you can put additional text up at the top of the page. So you can say, click in front of the form field and hit your enter button a couple times, and you say, please fill out the form below to request, information from our website, or whatever you would like to put, and then hit update, right? And then you can view it. Now, you can do additional things to this. You can change the colors, you can change the CSS. The one thing that we're not going to change is the fields themselves and the names of the fields, because all of our forms are connecting to the same database and we're outputting the same similar data, right? But this has to be part of your final website. In addition, so does the e-commerce. And like I said, if you guys have any questions about that, I'll be happy to help. Okay, any questions about that process? Yeah, like what are you going to ask? Like, Greg, an hour and 15 minutes ago, when you had that little $ and CON, what was that? I don't even know. I'm just making this stuff. Okay. Did you have a real question?
Yeah, how do you actually use the selected page?
Okay. Well, the way that you would use the select, the reason I hid the page was because you would use it as an administrator. Okay? So what you might do was you might make that page a password protected page where you log in and you take a look at the list of all of the people who have signed up for your website, right? Like I'll give you an example. When we created the WordPress, when we created the website for the WordPress, gotta back up. When we created the website for the Web Design Club, okay? Each one of us signed up to be a user on that and to be able to log in, right? If you go log into that site and you click users, you'll see a list of everybody's name and email address. And by the way, that's the way we can contact each other, all right? That's how you use the select form. It's going to the database, grabbing all our names, cementing the email address to them by using a common ID and formatting that data for us. Okay? That's how it gets used. Okay, so great job, you guys. Thank you so much for your patience. You guys have all now learned about making databases and interacting with them and creating interactive forms and inserting and pulling data out. Good job. So go ahead and continue to work on your websites, and I'm excited to see what those are going to look like. You guys are good to go.